"You've had a good run here, Mom, but it's time you moved out." He said it so easily, like asking me to pass the salt. No tremble in his voice, no flicker of guilt, just a fact delivered with the calm detachment of someone discussing a weather forecast. I sat across the table from him, still holding the spoon, halfway to my mouth, oatmeal cooling in its bowl. I thought I misheard. My hearing isn't perfect these days, but this I heard clear as day. "Excuse me?" I asked. Jake looked me dead in the eye, his hand resting casually on the back of the kitchen chair, the same chair his father built 47 years ago. He'd barely finished his coffee. Rebecca, his wife, was at the sink pretending to rinse something that didn't need rinsing, avoiding my eyes as usual. "We've been talking," he said, "and we think it's best if you found a place better suited for someone your age, maybe one of those nice senior communities." We've been talking, I see. Not a family conversation, a decision made and simply handed down like I was an old couch taking up too much space. I nodded slowly, buying time, trying to keep my voice from shaking. And what brought this on, Jake sighed, as if I were being difficult. "It's not personal, Mom. It's just this house. It's not really working for us anymore. We're thinking of redoing it, expanding, maybe turning it into a home office, rental space. We need flexibility, you know." I looked around the kitchen. My kitchen. The same ceramic rooster on the shelf. The same yellow paint I chose with my husband. This wasn't just a house. This was my life stitched into wood and walls. I raised Jake here, buried his father from this house. I painted these baseboards with my fingers when I couldn't find a proper brush. Rebecca chimed in, finally turning around. "And we're saying this with love, Helen. We just want what's best for everyone. You included. Everyone, not me, everyone else. I see," I said, folding my napkin slowly. "So you've made up your minds?" Jake nodded, relieved that I wasn't putting up a fight. "We'll help you look, of course. Maybe even cover the first few months if it's tight. But it's time. You've been here long enough. Long enough." That night, I sat in the living room long after they'd gone upstairs. My chair faced the fireplace, the same one that hadn't worked properly in years. Jake always said he'd fix it, but never got around to it. I didn't light a fire, just sat there with a blanket over my knees, staring at the shadows on the wall. 47 years. I remembered the day we poured the foundation. Tom and I barely 30, him with a sunburn, and me with blisters from laying tile. We built this house board by board, paycheck by paycheck. No contractors, just neighbors, some beer, and a lot of stubbornness. And now I was being asked to step out like I was holding up progress. But I wasn't angry. Not yet. Anger takes energy, and I hadn't decided yet how I felt. What I did feel, however, was something heavier, a kind of settling in the chest, like dust on a photograph no one looks at anymore. They think I'll just go quietly find a soft little room somewhere with cable TV and crafts on Tuesdays. They think I'll slip away and not disturb their plans. Maybe that's what they're used to. Me making things easier. I stood up slowly, joint stiff from the cold, walked to the hallway and turned off the light, passed the door to Jake and Rebecca's room without stopping, their muffled laughter behind closed doors. I went into my room, my sanctuary, and sat on the edge of the bed. They'd given me no timeline, but I knew it would come soon. They'd start mentioning apartments. Brochures would appear on the table. Friendly tours would be scheduled. It wasn't about needing space. It was about no longer needing me. I leaned over, opened the nightstand drawer, and pulled out the little black book where Tom and I used to keep household expenses. The pages were yellowing, but I still used it. Not for budgeting anymore, but out of habit. There were notes in Tom's handwriting receipts tucked between pages, and between two pages folded neatly the original deed to the house. My name. His name paid off in full, 22 years ago. The house was mine. I closed the drawer and sat still for a long time, listening to the silence that lives between the walls of old homes. The thing is, they forgot who they were dealing with. They forgot I built this place with my bare hands and buried my husband with the grace of a woman who does not bend to storms. They forgot I'm not done yet. The first time I saw this land, it was nothing but weeds, rocks, and promise. Tom stood beside me with a folded newspaper in hand and mud on his boots. "It's not much," he said, "but it's ours if we want it." It was 1974. We had $2,000 in savings, one rusty pickup, and hearts bigger than our bank account. We signed the papers under a shade tree using the hood of the truck as our table. That afternoon, we marked the corners of the house with twine and hope. That's what this house was built on, hope, and a kind of stubborn love that doesn't show up in movies. Tom was no architect, and I was no builder, but between his hands and my will, we made it stand. I mixed concrete with a shovel and poured it barefoot. We borrowed tools, bartered favors, and worked after hours under porch lights. Jake was born 2 years later. His first crib sat in the unfinished hallway. He used to fall asleep to the sound of hammering and wake to the smell of sawdust and cinnamon toast. He doesn't remember any of that. Or maybe he does, and it's just easier not to. The swing in the backyard. I hung that with a torn rope from Tom's fishing shed and an old tire we pulled out of the ditch. The peach tree planted the day Jake turned 5. It still blooms, though the fruit's gone bitter. All these things, the little cracks in the hallway tiles, the slope in the kitchen floor, the squeaky third stair, they're not flaws. They're signatures, like wrinkles on a face that has lived long and well. I see those marks and remember who we were, who I was before life started folding me into the background. I thought about all this the morning after Jake's announcement. I woke early, as always, brewed a pot of coffee, not that anyone else drinks it, and stepped onto the porch. The boards creaked like they always do. Tom used to say that meant the house was greeting you. It knows your step. He'd grin. The fog was still low, brushing the grass, and the smell of damp earth brought tears to my eyes without warning. Not the kind that fall, the kind that just fill up and sting. I sat on the porch swing, pulled Tom's old flannel tighter around my shoulders, and stared out at what used to be our view. It was mostly houses, now fences, kids with scooters, a far cry from the open field we had back then. Still, I loved it. They want to take it, not because they need it, but because they think I've had enough of it. I watched the light come up slow, washing the roof lines in soft gold, and I knew what I had to do. I wasn't going to let them sell it from under me, and I certainly wasn't going to pack my things and leave like a guest who'd overstayed her welcome. No, if I was leaving, it would be on my terms. And the house, it wasn't going to them, not anymore. Later that day, when Jake left for work and Rebecca disappeared to her Pilates or brunch or wherever it is, she goes when there's no one to supervise, I pulled the old lockbox from the top of the closet. My fingers knew the code by heart. Tom's birthday. Inside were the things that mattered. The deed, the will, the insurance documents, and the savings account we'd never touched except for emergencies. I smiled at that. They didn't even know it existed. I opened the drawer beneath it and pulled out my address book. Not the one on the phone, the real one. Pages worn soft from decades of hands. I flipped through it until I found the name Charlotte Monroe. Really, Charlotte was an old church friend, a woman who'd lost her husband around the same time I lost Tom. We hadn't spoken in a while, but she always sent Christmas cards, and she'd made a name for herself selling homes in town. I dialed her number. She picked up on the third ring. "Charlotte, it's Helen Mayfield. Helen Lord. I haven't heard your voice in years." I smiled, though my heart was pounding. "I need your help." Quietly. There was a pause on the other end, but not the bad kind. The kind that says someone's listening with both ears. "I'm here," she said. "What do you need? I want to sell my house, Helen." Her voice softened. "Are you sure? As sure as I've ever been." "And Jake." I hesitated. "He doesn't need to know. Not yet." Charlotte didn't ask why. She didn't need to. "All right," she said. Then let's get started. By the time we hung up, we had a plan. No open houses, no signs in the yard, everything by appointment only and only with buyers ready to move fast. Charlotte would send a photographer who understood discretion. She knew people, widowed professors, traveling nurses, quiet types who didn't need everything to be shiny and new. The right kind of people. I hung up the phone and looked around the living room. The couch was lopsided. The rug was faded. The whole place smelled like lemon polish and old books. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. There's a drawer in the hallway I haven't opened in years. The wood sticks when it's humid, and it always lets out a little groan when I tug too hard like it's tired of being reminded. I pulled it open today, careful not to wake the rest of the house. Inside envelopes, receipts, a brittle rubber band that crumbled in my fingers. This is where I kept the favors, not cards or birthday notes. Those I stopped getting years ago. This drawer held the real history. The canceled checks, the tuition receipts, the auto repair bills marked paid in my handwriting. Jake's name was on nearly everyone. $5,000 for his first car when he was 19. The rust-cold thing he loved until it broke down in the middle of winter. He cried when the mechanic said it was dead. I wrote the check the same day. $12,000 for his student loans when the interest started stacking faster than he could breathe. Just until I get on my feet, he said. That was 23 years ago. $8,400 for the down payment on this very house when Jake and Rebecca were struggling after their second baby. We'll pay you back as soon as we can, Rebecca said. She even hugged me. That might have been the last time. I ran my finger along the inked names, the totals, the years. This drawer was a ledger of quiet sacrifices. Every dollar was meant to say, I believe in you. Even when they never said thank you. Somewhere along the way, helping turned into expecting. Then expecting turned into entitlement. I didn't mind. Not at first. That's what mothers do, right? You hold your kid's hand when he falls and you never really let go. You stay available. Steady background. But background becomes wallpaper, and wallpaper just fades. Jake hasn't asked me how I'm feeling in months. Not since that doctor's appointment when I didn't tell him the full truth. I didn't want to worry him. Funny thing is, I doubt he'd have noticed. Rebecca stopped talking to me the day I forgot to buy the oat milk she likes. A week later, I offered to make dinner. She waved me off with that tight little smile. We're doing clean eating now, she said, as if I were a bag of processed cheese. And the kids, they're sweet, but they take their cues from their parents. I'm the woman who lives upstairs and keeps her TV too loud. That's how far I've come from lifeline to inconvenience. I closed the drawer gently, like tucking in an old child. Later that morning, while they were out, Jake at the office, Rebecca wherever I walked through the rooms with a yellow pad in hand, notes for myself, what to keep, what to give away, what to take with me when the time comes. I passed by Jake's old room. It still has the wallpaper we picked out together, little rockets and stars peeling at the corners now. He wanted to be an astronaut once. I bought him a telescope with my grocery money that year. We lived off soup and bread for weeks. Now he wants me gone. My hand trembled as I wrote, donate bookshelf, keep quilt, toss broken lamp. There's a heaviness to letting go, but there's also clarity. When you strip a life down to what you can carry, it shows you what really matters. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked around. It wasn't sadness I felt. Not really. It was something quieter, like waking up from a long nap and remembering who you are. I remembered the way Tom used to look at me when I figured something out before he did. Sharp as a tack, he'd grin. Never underestimate my wife. He'd laugh, wrap his arms around me, and say, she built this family with her bare hands. He was right. I paid for Jake's braces when the insurance refused. Paid for summer camp for his honeymoon for the time he got laid off and didn't tell Rebecca. He never said thank you, not once. When their hot water heater broke, I wrote the check before he could ask. When Rebecca needed surgery after the third baby, I sat with her at the hospital and stayed 2 nights sleeping in a chair. She never mentioned it again. It's not about the money. It never was. It's the vanishing, the slow fade from person to function, from mother to footnote. I used to believe that if I just kept giving, eventually, I'd be seen again. That they'd look up one day and say, "There she is, the woman who held us all together." But people don't look at foundations. They just build on top of them. That afternoon, I called Charlotte again. "I'm ready," I said. "Let's list it." "You sure?" "I'm sure." She came by 2 hours later with her assistant, a quiet young woman with a camera and kind eyes. I made coffee, served it in the blue mugs I saved for company. We sat in the living room, the one I decorated with coupons and paint samples from the hardware store. Charlotte asked a few gentle questions. I told her I wanted privacy. No signs, no social media, just serious buyers, people who understood what a house like this meant. Her assistant took pictures of the front porch, the hallway, the kitchen tile. I laid on my knees. She paused in the living room and looked at the worn armchair by the window. "This place has soul," she said quietly. I nodded. "It's been lived in." That night, I stood in front of the mirror and looked at my reflection. The woman staring back wasn't bitter or broken. She was awake. Rebecca's footsteps always sounded impatient heels, too sharp for a kitchen floor. That morning, she was up early, pacing between cabinets, slamming a cupboard now and then, making enough noise to let the whole house know she had things to do, and someone was in her way. That someone, of course, was me. I'd made tea and sat at the kitchen table with the newspaper folded, just so, a habit, a ritual. The way I kept my morning quiet even when others filled the room with noise. She didn't look at me when she reached past to grab her supplements. Just that tight smile, no eye contact, and then she moved to the sink. "You used the last of the almond milk," she said flatly. "I wasn't aware it was reserved," I replied, sipping my tea, "but I'll replace it." She exhaled as if I'd said something offensive. "It's fine. Just next time check." Check. As if I were a tenant. She began fussing with the blender, dropping handfuls of powder and greens into it, like she was fighting gravity. The noise filled the room. I kept reading, letting my eyes move over the same paragraph for the third time. Jake came in moments later, jacket Halfon phone to his ear. He nodded at me, mouthed a vague warning, and turned his attention to the screen. "Tell them I'll review the contract by noon," he said into the phone. "And no, we're not budging on the delivery timeline." He poured himself coffee. Didn't sit, just hovered, barking orders, sipping hot bitterness without pause. Rebecca turned off the blender with a dramatic flourish. "You're going to be late," she snapped. Jake muttered something and disappeared down the hall. Rebecca stayed. She took her glass of green sludge and leaned against the counter, finally turning to me. So she said in that voice that pretends to be casual but is anything but, "Have you given any thought to what Jake mentioned?" I set down the paper. "You mean the part where I'm asked to leave my own home?" She blinked, then laughed nervously. "It's not like that. No." She crossed her arms. "We just think it's time for something more suitable for you. I mean, this house is big. There are stairs. The plumbing's old. And honestly, you'd have more freedom somewhere designed for old people." I didn't say that. "No, but you meant it." She didn't respond, just sipped her drink and looked away. I waited. Let the silence settle like dust on the countertop. I found it unnerves people more than words. Rebecca, never one to tolerate stillness, pressed on. "There's a place in Brookstone Heights, lovely campus, lots of programs, and they do housekeeping. You'd be able to just relax. As if my current life is some kind of strain on her. I took another sip of tea. "You've been doing research. We care about your well-being." "No, you care about the space," she stiffened. "That's not fair. Neither is pushing someone out because they don't fit the aesthetic anymore." Rebecca rolled her eyes. A tick. I've come to expect, you're making this difficult. I haven't done anything. Exactly. She placed her glass in the sink and walked toward the hallway, muttering, "We're just trying to make this work. Don't be so dramatic." Dramatic? I've cleaned your children's vomit off this floor at 2 in the morning. I wanted to say, I've baked birthday cakes you forgot to order. I've paid the vet bill when your dog swallowed that Lego. But yes, I'm dramatic because I'd like not to be evicted from the home I built. She was gone before I could say more. But maybe that was for the best. I sat alone for a while, finishing my tea, the paper untouched. The words had stopped making sense. The house was quiet again, but not peaceful. When I finally stood, I didn't go upstairs. I walked outside instead. The sun was low and the air smelled like morning grass. I stood at the edge of the yard looking at the flower bed I once tended every Saturday. It's half weeds now. Rebecca said they were going to redo the garden. Of course they were. I walked back in and climbed the stairs slowly. Not because I had to. My knees are still good, but because I wanted to feel every step. This house, every creak and groan, still speaks to me. It tells me where Tom spilled paint, where Jake scraped his elbow trying to slide down the banister where I sat for hours after getting the call about my sister's cancer. This house has held my whole life, and now I am being held at arm's length within it. I closed the door to my room and sat on the bed. They think they're doing me a kindness by giving me time, but I see it clearly now. They've already moved on. They're just waiting for me to catch up and disappear. I didn't sleep much that night, not because of pain, though my joints had their usual protest, but because of silence. A silence that crept under the door, seeped into my thoughts, and made a home in the hollows of my chest. Funny, isn't it? You can live in the same place for decades and suddenly feel like a guest. The walls shift. The air thickens. Even the floorboards stop recognizing your step. By 5 a.m., I gave up pretending to rest. I slipped out of bed and wrapped Tom's old sweater around my shoulders. The green one with the worn elbows still smelled faintly of cedar. Downstairs, the house was asleep. I didn't bother turning on the lights. I didn't need them. I knew every corner, every creak, every place where the floor dipped slightly. In the kitchen, I moved slow. Kettle on mugs out. I sliced half a banana, sprinkled a little cinnamon, poured myself a cup of tea. Rituals. Sometimes rituals are all you have when your place in the world is being edited without your consent. I sat at the kitchen table, the one Tom built when Jake was in kindergarten. It still had the scratch where Jake dropped a wrench. I remember yelling, then laughing, then brushing his hair back and telling him it was just a table. He grinned, gap-toothed and proud. That table outlived the man who built it. Outlived the boy who once sat at it with sticky fingers and dreams about spaceships. I ran my fingers across the grain and took a deep breath. They want to tear this all down, strip it, repaint it, stage it for guests. They want to sterilize it, make it Instagram ready, turn my life into a neutral backdrop. They want me gone so they can start again. Well, let them start again, but not with my house. I reached into the drawer by the fridge and pulled out my small notebook, the one I used for grocery lists and reminders. I flipped to a blank page and began to write. Bank appointment title documents, Charlotte. Confirm buyer readiness. Start packing books. Arrange storage for keepsakes. Call insurance. Each line felt like a brick being laid. Not in a wall, in a road, a way forward. I didn't cry. Crying was for another version of me. The one who still waited for things to get better. The one who thought patience earned respect. That version was done. By 6:30, I heard movement upstairs. The thud of feet, the flush of plumbing. Jake's voice, low and clipped, probably already on a work call. Rebecca humming, always humming when she's pleased with herself. I didn't say good morning when they came down, didn't offer coffee. I simply stepped outside with my tea and closed the door behind me. The air was still the kind of morning that makes everything feel paused, like the world is taking a breath before something shifts. I walked out to the garden. The roses were long gone, but the earth still held the shape of them. I knelt, pressed a hand to the soil, cool, damp, waiting. It occurred to me then that I wasn't just leaving a house, I was burying a version of myself. The mother who quietly endured, the helper, the giver who never asked for anything in return, the placeholder for other people's comfort. That woman had done her job. Now it was time for someone else to emerge. Back inside, I found the small lockbox and placed it on the table. I flipped the code open. 1967, the year we moved in. Inside, everything sat in neat stacks, untouched, but ready. Deed will investment portfolio. Tom's discharge papers from the Navy, the original floor plan of the house sketched by hand. I laid it all out carefully. Then I took the phone and called Charlotte. Still early, she answered, voice groggy but kind. "I'm ready," I said. "You sure I'm more sure than I've been in a long time?" There was a pause. "All right," she said. "Then let's get to work." After the call, I pulled out a second notebook, a red one with a cracked spine. I hadn't used it in years. It was where I kept thoughts that didn't fit anywhere else. I turned to a clean page and wrote, "They think this house belongs to them, now that I'm just a footnote, a gentle removal, but they've forgotten something important. I was here before them. I built this from dirt and debt and scraped knuckles, and I will decide how it ends." Charlotte arrived at exactly 10:00 a.m., punctual as always. She parked across the street, careful not to draw attention, and walked up the driveway like a neighbor dropping by for coffee. She hadn't changed much, still had that brisk walk, the tidy gray bob, the habit of smoothing the front of her blazer before every conversation. Only her eyes had softened with age, not duller, just quieter, the kind that had seen enough to know when not to ask too many questions. I opened the door before she could knock. "Morning," I said. She gave me a look, a knowing one, and held up a brown leather folder. "Let's do this properly." We sat at the kitchen table. Rebecca had taken the car for her Pilates class. Jake was in the den with his noise-canceling headphones on, shouting into Zoom meetings. The house had space to talk as long as you stayed beneath the volume of their lives. Charlotte spread out the documents, preliminary valuation disclosures, agency agreement. Her assistant wasn't with her this time. "Discretion," Charlotte said. "She's young and sweet but doesn't understand the meaning of the word yet." I chuckled. Good instinct. We went through everything line by line. The current market was strong, she said. The neighborhood, despite its gentrification, still carried weight. The house, though dated, had character. Buyers loved character these days. "What kind of buyer are you thinking?" she asked. "Someone who needs a home," I said simply. "Not a status symbol." She nodded, made a note. "No flippers, then. No flippers, no developers, no people with clipboards who talk about knocking out walls before they've even walked through the front door." She smiled. "Understood." We talked timelines. I told her I was ready to move fast, not rushed, but not meandering either. She asked where I'd go, and I told her, not far. A small cottage 2 towns over near the library and the co-op. A place I'd visited once with Tom when we were dreaming of retirement before the word meant surrender. I hadn't signed anything yet, but the place was still available. Charlotte offered to make a call when we were done. We paused when Jake came into the kitchen looking for more coffee. He saw Charlotte, gave her a polite nod. "Oh, Charlotte, right from church. Didn't know you two kept in touch." "Just catching up," she said smoothly. "Mom, I'll be in meetings most of the afternoon," he said, already turning away. "All right." He didn't ask what we were doing, didn't notice the papers. Just walked out, phone in hand, already mid-sentence with someone more important. Charlotte watched him go and raised an eyebrow. "Does he know?" she asked. "No." "You planning to tell him eventually?" She hesitated. "He's going to be surprised." I met her gaze. Let him be. I've spent years giving notice. None of it was heard. We signed the listing agreement. I initialed every page carefully. Charlotte made copies and put everything back in her folder, neat as church linens. I'll start showing quietly, she said. No signs, no ads, just direct contacts. I have a couple older retiring looking to downsize. They'd appreciate this place for what it is. Good. And when offers come in, you'll be the first to know. She stood and gathered her things. You all right? She asked. More than we hugged briefly, just enough. As she turned to go, I said, Charlotte. She stopped. Yes, if this goes smoothly, I may ask you to help with the new place. She smiled. It would be an honor. After she left, I stood at the front window and watched her drive off. The house was quiet again, but this time it was a different kind of quiet. Not the kind that made me feel invisible, the kind that signaled something was starting. A new engine humming beneath the stillness. The day the first buyer came, I made banana bread. Not because I was trying to impress anyone, I'm past that, but because the smell reminded me that this was a home, not a transaction. If someone didn't feel that they weren't the right buyer. Charlotte arrived 10 minutes early as promised. She wore a navy blue jacket, her serious but approachable uniform, and had that leather folder tucked under her arm like always. Just one couple today, she said. No pressure. They're in no rush and they're used to older homes. I nodded. Let's see if they deserve it. The couple was in their late 50s, maybe early 60s, Elaine and Martin. She had silver-streaked hair and gentle eyes. He wore orthopedic shoes and didn't try to hide them. I liked them immediately, for that alone. They didn't talk about tearing down walls. They asked about sun exposure, drafty corners, whether the porch got morning light. Elaine ran her hand slowly along the stair railing, not to check for dust, but because she could tell it had been touched by years of hands. Martin lingered in the garden, asked if the peach trees still bore fruit. I told him it did, but it wasn't sweet anymore. They rarely are after a certain age, he said. But they still bloom. That nearly did me in. Inside, I served tea and slices of banana bread on the blue plates I'd saved for holidays. We sat in the living room, not as seller and buyers, but as people. Elaine turned to me at one point. You must have loved this house. I didn't pretend. I did. I still do. She nodded. Then why are you selling? That question would have unraveled me a month ago. Not now. Because it's mine, I said. And I'd like it to go to someone who understands that. They didn't press. Didn't poke for the family drama hiding under the rugs, just nodded with the quiet respect of people who had stories of their own. After they left, Charlotte turned to me with a small smile. They want to make an offer. Full asking. I raised an eyebrow. Already they said the house felt like it had been waiting for them. I didn't say anything, just stared at the wall where Tom's photo used to hang. The nail was still there. I hadn't taken it down yet. Let's hold a day or two, I said finally. Make sure it's the right one. Charlotte nodded. Of course. But I already knew. I'd known since Elaine ran her hand along the stair rail. Over the next few days, Charlotte fielded 2 more inquiries, both from younger buyers. One wanted to flip it. The other wanted to gut it and install floor-to-ceiling glass. No, I said. She didn't argue. Meanwhile, I started sorting. I didn't tell Jake. Not yet. He and Rebecca were too busy ordering furniture for the remodel I wasn't supposed to know about. They'd assumed I'd leave quietly, that I'd accept a leaflet nod through a tour of pastel-painted senior units and vanish with a thank you basket and a prepaid Uber. They didn't know I was orchestrating something else entirely. Charlotte called the following Monday. They're ready to formalize the offer. They've waived inspections. I smiled. They really want it. They do, but they have one request. What is it they'd like to meet you again properly before finalizing not just as the seller, but as well as you? That gave me pause. In this world, people don't ask for conversations. They want keys and square footage, not the fingerprints behind the wallpaper. But Elaine and Martin weren't people who rushed. Tell them I'll bake something. That Wednesday, we sat again at the same kitchen table. I served peach cobbler, this time bitter but warm, the kind that needed vanilla ice cream to balance it, though I didn't have any left. They didn't mind. They brought their own. Ela took a long look around after dessert. "We'll take care of it," she said softly. "The garden, the porch, even the creaky stair. We won't strip it down." Martin nodded. "We're not trying to change it. We just want to live in it." I believed them. That evening, after they left, I sat with Charlotte by the window. "I want 2 conditions in the agreement," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "First, they can't start any major demolition for a year. No walls, no floors, no gutting, just living." She nodded, scribbling notes. "Second, I want one last morning here after closing alone." Charlotte looked at me for a long time, then quietly said, "I'll make sure of it." It's strange what your hands remember. The curve of a teacup, the squeak of a drawer, the way Tom's signature used to trail off at the end, like he was always in a hurry but didn't want to be rude. My hands remembered those things this week as I pulled out files, signed forms, and watched 30 years of paperwork pass through my fingers like water. The sale was moving faster than I'd expected. Charlotte was efficient like that. And now it was time to make it official. The buyers had signed. The bank was ready. All that remained was for me to put pen to paper and untie the knot that had held this house to my name since 1974. I didn't cry. I thought I would. But by the time I sat in that too-cold office with a pen that looked too shiny for something so final, the tears had dried up before they began. The escrow officer, a polite young woman named Danielle, walked me through every line. Sign here and here. This initial means you agree to vacate by, I know what it means. She blinked. Yes, ma'am. I didn't mean to sound sharp. I just wanted it done. Quick cuts, not slow ones. I signed everything. When she slid the final sheet toward me, she paused. This page confirms wire transfer instructions. You'll be receiving the funds here. She pointed to the account I'd opened years ago, the same one Jake didn't know about, the same one I'd kept separate not out of secrecy, but survival. Yes, I said, but I'll be transferring most of it to a trust for myself, I said. Then after a beat, and someone who still sees me, she nodded, not pushing, just typed something into her computer and clicked her way out of my history. By the time I left the office, the documents were already on their way to the buyers. In less than 72 hours, it would be done. The house would no longer be mine or Jake's or Rebecca's. It would belong to people who asked permission before touching the stairs. I went straight to the bank. Linda was working. The branch manager who'd helped me refinance back when Tom was still alive. She'd aged, but she still wore the same red-framed glasses and lipstick that said she wasn't ready to go quietly. "Mrs. Mayfield," she said, standing to greet me. "We got the notification this morning. Congratulations." I sat across from her desk. I need to set up a living trust. Quietly. She didn't blink. How much discretion enough that no one can get curious without my say-so? She nodded. "We can do that." We spent the next hour going over forms, protections, options. I designated myself the primary beneficiary and trustee. Then I added a secondary name, Ellie, my granddaughter. The only person in that house who still asked me if I'd eaten. The only one who remembered to knock before entering my room. The only one who ever said, "Grandma, are you okay?" and meant it. Linda reviewed everything and slid the papers over. "You'll need to tell her eventually," she said gently. "I will, but not now. Let me leave this life before handing her the key to the next." Linda nodded. Understood. On the way home, I stopped by the hardware store, bought 3 boxes, 2 rolls of tape, and a thick black marker. That night, while Jake and Rebecca were out dinner with clients or whatever excuse they'd given, I started packing. Not everything. Not yet. Just the parts that mattered. Tom's fishing journal, my recipe cards, the quilt for my mother, a photo of Jake when he was still mine. 5 years old, missing teeth, hugging my leg like I was the whole world. I wrapped it carefully and labeled the box. Keep fragile. Just like me. There's a sound that only empty rooms make. A kind of echo. Not loud, not sharp, but soft and hollow like breath in a church after everyone's gone. I heard it for the first time in years when I took down the curtains in the guest room. Dust floated in the late afternoon sun, and I stood there for a long time just watching it settle. I'd forgotten this light, golden quiet, the kind that makes everything look like it's part of a memory. The closet was already empty. I'd packed what little I wanted days ago. 1 suitcase, 2 boxes, everything else. The things I thought I'd one day pass down, I'd either donated or left in a neat pile by the door labeled free. Jake wouldn't miss them. Rebecca certainly wouldn't. They were supposed to be away for the weekend, a conference. I didn't ask where. I didn't need to know. I moved through the house slowly, room by room, closing drawers, wiping down shelves. Each space held a story I didn't have the strength to retell. The hallway still had the growth chart I'd penciled in when Jake was little. I ran my fingers over the markings. 37 age, 642 age 8, and then abruptly the lines stopped. He'd refused to let me measure him after that. Said it was childish. I never erased them, not even when Rebecca painted the wall beige. The living room was next. I'd already taken down the photos. The only one I left was the picture of Tom above the fireplace. His eyes followed me around the room like he always had something kind to say but didn't want to interrupt. "I'm almost done," I whispered to him. The kitchen was last. I stood there in silence, listening to the faint hum of the fridge, the tick of the wall clock. I wiped down the counters, straightened the chairs, and finally turned to the table. I placed a single envelope on it, Jake's name written in ink, my handwriting still steady. Inside, just 2 things. The contact information for Charlotte and a copy of the sale agreement already signed, already filed, already funded. I didn't leave a note. I didn't owe him an explanation. Not after the years of silent dismissal, the slow push out the door disguised as kindness. Let him read the paperwork. Let him feel for once what it means to be excluded. I picked up my bags and walked to the front door. My taxi was waiting at the curb engine, low driver leaning against the hood with a bored look. I took one last look around. The house felt smaller now, not just empty, complete like a book with its final page written. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me, locking it one last time. The keys, all 3, I slid through the mail slot. Let them find them that way. As the taxi pulled away, I didn't look back. Not once. Some things deserve your eyes, others don't. The taxi dropped me off at a small inn just off Route 18. Nothing fancy. 2 stories, a cracked parking lot, and a front desk run by a woman who didn't ask questions. That's what I needed. A place to be invisible for 2 days while everything shifted behind me. I checked in under my maiden name, Old Habit. Tom used to joke that Helen Grant sounded like a librarian who knew everyone's secrets. I liked that version of myself. Still do. My room was simple. 1 bed, a desk, a television with bad reception, and curtains the color of weak tea. I didn't unpack, just set the suitcase in the corner and place my phone on the nightstand screen down. The first night I slept 10 hours. A deep, dreamless kind of sleep, the kind you only get when something heavy has finally been set down. The next morning I walked to the diner across the street, ordered pancakes and coffee. The waitress, a girl with tired eyes and chipped polish, didn't try to chat, just refilled my mug without being asked. Kindness, the quiet kind. At noon, Charlotte called. "It's done," she said. "The funds have cleared. The papers have been recorded." I let that sink in. I looked out the window at the street, the cars, the people walking past with no idea what had just happened. And the keys I asked delivered this morning. I gave them the letter you left. Did they read it? They didn't need to. They just smiled. I closed my eyes. For a moment, I said nothing. "I'll wire the rest to your trust account today," she added. "The rest is yours to do with as you please." I nodded. "Thank you, Charlotte. You sure you don't want to be there when he sees it?" "No." I said, "Let him find it the way he found me." Too late. We ended the call. I left a generous tip and walked back to the room, the October wind cutting through my sleeves. But I didn't mind. I was lighter now. I was free. At 3:14 p.m., my phone rang. Jake. I didn't answer. At 3:17, he called again, then again. By 3:22, the messages started. "Mom, where are you? Why is there a sold sign in front of the house? What is going on? Call me now." Then, "Rebecca, is this a joke? Tell me this is a joke. Why would you do this? We had plans." I laughed at that one. Plans, I spent 30 years fitting myself around their plans, around their needs, their moods, their calendars. I was the background music to their lives expected to play on cue but never too loudly. Well, the music had stopped. At 4:06 p.m., Jake sent the longest message yet. "Mom, I don't understand. Why would you sell the house without telling us we were going to renovate? Make it nice again. You could have lived there with us. We were trying to help you. You've put us in a really difficult position. The kids are confused. Rebecca is furious. Please call me. We need to fix this." I read it twice. Not once did he ask if I was okay. Not once did he say, "I'm sorry." Only, "You've put us in a difficult position." No son. You did that all by yourself. That evening, I poured myself a glass of wine from a bottle I'd bought in 1998 and never opened. I'd packed it in the suitcase knowing it would come in handy. I sipped it slowly, watching the sun disappear behind the old gas station across the street. It didn't matter that the view wasn't perfect. It was mine. I was no longer waiting for someone to notice I was unhappy. I'd taken my unhappiness and turned it into movement, into action, into boundaries they never thought I'd draw. At 7:00 p.m., I turned off my phone, not because I was angry, because I was done. I returned on a Tuesday. The new place wasn't ready just yet, but I didn't need long, just one morning, as I'd requested to say goodbye on my own terms. Elaine and Martin had graciously agreed through Charlotte to leave the door unlocked until noon. I arrived just after dawn, walking up the front path like a guest in my own story. The garden was still there, ragged but patient, the peach tree standing bare but unbothered. The light over the porch flickered slightly, a bulb I'd meant to change for years. Inside, the air had shifted, not cold, just different. The furniture was gone. The echoes were back. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, letting the quiet wrap around me. I didn't know he'd be there. Jake. He sat in the living room, my living room, on the floor, legs bent awkwardly, arms resting on his knees like a boy in trouble. He looked up when I stepped in. His face was pale drawn in that particular way men get when they haven't slept and still want to pretend they're in control. "Mom." I didn't answer. He stood too quickly, as if realizing how small he looked from the floor. "You sold it," he said without telling us. "It wasn't yours to know." He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. "You could have said something, given us a chance to what convinced me to stay quiet a little longer. Pack boxes with a smile. We could have worked something out." "No, I said you would have worked me out like an equation. One more obstacle between your ambition and your perfect floors." He looked wounded. That stung not because I pied him, but because I'd raised a man who still didn't understand the weight of dismissal. "Do you have any idea how this feels?" he said, stepping closer. "To come home and find everything gone." I stared at him. I do. He froze. I let the words hang there still and sharp. I know what it's like to walk into a room that was once mine and feel like a stranger. I continued. To be told gently but clearly that I don't belong anymore. That's not what we meant, he said quickly. Things were tight. We were trying to make it work. Work for who? He didn't answer. I raised you in this house, I said. I kept it running with coupons and overtime and things your father never saw. I stayed up nights sewing costumes, driving you to practice warming soup while you sulked. And then, when it was your turn to offer space, you offered an exit. Jake's shoulders dropped. His eyes looked damp, but he didn't let the tears fall. Not yet. Pride's a stubborn thing. You blindsided us, he said softer now. Rebecca's furious. I smiled. Of course she is. He took a deep breath. So what now? You're just gone. You just leave, and what, start over? I start again, I corrected. Not over. I bring with me everything that matters. But this house, this place that once held love and turned cold, I'm not dragging that with me. Silence again. He looked away. Looked at the window, the ceiling, anywhere but me. I never meant to hurt you, he said. You didn't mean anything, I replied. And that's the problem. He flinched like I'd struck him. I walked past him, slow and deliberate, and stepped into the kitchen one last time. I ran my hand over the counter. I could still feel the heat from pies, the stickiness of spilled juice, the weight of elbows leaning during long talks. The table was gone, but the indentations in the floor remained. Jake stayed in the doorway watching me. I don't know what to say, he said. Then don't say anything, he blinked. Just remember, I added, turning to face him. I left with grace. You gave me no choice, but I took mine. I stepped past him without waiting for a reply. Out the door, down the path. He didn't follow, and I didn't turn around. When I left the house that day, I thought that would be it. That the chapter was closed, and I could walk away without the echo following me. But silence has a way of trailing you, whispering in your steps, settling into your bones. Jake didn't call for 3 days. Neither did Rebecca. I expected anger, maybe guilt, but the quiet was heavier than either. I didn't check my phone often. I didn't need to. I knew what he was thinking. That silence would punish me. The way people go cold when they've lost control. I spent those first few days in a furnished rental, small but clean. The kind of place made for transitions, not lived in, just borrowed. A kettle, a bed, a lamp that flickered if you touched the cord too hard. Peaceful in its emptiness. For the first time in years, I could hear my own thoughts without someone sighing in the next room. I thought about the day Tom and I brought Jake home from the hospital. How we didn't even have a crib. He slept in a drawer lined with blankets. How tiny he was. How his fingers curled around my thumb like it was the only thing keeping him on earth. I wondered when that grip had loosened. On the 4th evening, my phone rang again. Jake. I didn't answer. Then another call. Then a text. Please, I need to talk. I let him wait. Not to be cruel, but because I finally could. When I did pick up, it was morning. The light was soft, kind. The kind of light that forgives wrinkles. Mom. He said, his voice rough. Can we meet? I hesitated. Why, I don't understand. Why didn't you trust me? That startled a small laugh out of me. Trust, I said. Jake, you asked me to move out of my own home. He sighed like a man who wanted to rewrite a script that had already been performed. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. He went quiet. I could hear traffic in the background, the sound of him pacing. Then softly, I just wanted to make things better for you, I said. Not for me. Another pause. Then I came by today. The new owners let me in for a minute. They said you stopped by that morning. I did. It feels different now. It should. He exhaled shakily. It doesn't feel like home. No, I said, because it isn't. That was the first time he didn't argue. He didn't hang up either. We just sat there separated by distance and years of misunderstanding. The silence between us thick, but alive. Not cruel this time, just honest. Finally, I said, you built your life around having more Jake, more rooms, more plans, more reasons. I spent mine trying to give it all to you. I don't regret that. But there comes a point when giving stops being love and starts being erasure. He didn't speak. I could tell he was swallowing hard. You don't have to understand, I continued. Just remember that sometimes silence isn't punishment, it's peace. There was a long pause. Then very softly he said, I miss Dad. I know. I think he'd be angry at me. He'd be disappointed. I said, but only because he expected more from you. Another breath, another pause. Do you hate me? The question surprised me. No, I said. I could never hate you, but I needed you to see me again. Not as a problem to fix, but as a person. Sometimes it takes losing something to open your eyes. He whispered something. Maybe I'm sorry. Maybe I love you. I couldn't tell, and I didn't ask him to repeat it. When the line went dead, I sat by the window staring at the street below. A dog walker passed, a boy on a scooter, life moving along. The silence that followed wasn't heavy this time. It was clean. It was earned. And for the first time in a long time, I realized it wasn't loneliness I was feeling. It was space. The new cottage was smaller than I remembered. When Tom and I first saw it, we joked that we'd need to downsize our memories to fit inside. But now, standing in the doorway with 2 boxes and 1 suitcase, it felt just right, like the inside of a well-worn glove. No stairs, no drafty corners, just soft light, quiet walls, and enough room to breathe without apologizing for the air I took up. The landlord was kind, a retired nurse. She handed me the keys with a smile and said, "Take your time settling in. This place needs someone like you." I don't know what she meant, but I chose to believe it was something good. I unpacked slowly, not out of fatigue, but intention. Every object I placed was a declaration. I am still here. Not in the shadows, not as a placeholder. Here in the center of my own story. The quilt went over the back of the chair. The chipped teacup, the one Jake had painted when he was 5, sat by the sink. Tom's flannel hung on the coat hook. The photograph of me holding newborn Jake stayed in the drawer, not out of shame, out of privacy. By the end of the first week, the space began to feel like mine. I went to the co-op on Wednesday. The girl at the register smiled without rushing me. On Thursday, I signed up for a reading circle at the library. Not because I wanted to talk, but because I wanted to listen. It was strange to build something for myself without asking permission. Strange and beautiful. Jake came by on the 10th day. He called first. I appreciated that. It was the first small thing he got right in a long time. When he arrived, he brought tulips yellow like the ones I used to plant along the south wall of the house. He stood at the door awkwardly, unsure whether to hug me or just say hello. I didn't help him decide. I made tea. We sat at the small kitchen table, knees bumping under its narrow wood. "I wanted to see you," he said. "You're looking." He nodded, embarrassed. "I've been thinking a lot." I waited. He swallowed. "I didn't know how much space I was taking until you left." "You didn't think of it as space," I said. "You thought of it as inheritance." He didn't deny it. He just looked at his hands. "I thought I was helping," he said, "offering you comfort, a plan. But I think what I was really doing was clearing the path for myself. You were..." He nodded slowly. "I forgot you were still walking your own." That silenced us both for a while. Then he said something I hadn't heard from him in years. I was wrong. I looked at him, really looked. And for a moment I saw the boy again. Not the man who made boardroom decisions with his mother's name in the margins, but the boy who used to fall asleep on my chest while I hummed old hymns. "Thank you for saying that," I said. He looked up. "I don't need you to fix it," I added. "I just needed you to see it." He nodded. "I see it now." He stood not long after. I didn't ask him to stay. He didn't ask if he could. At the door, he hesitated. "Ellie misses you." My breath caught just for a second. "She keeps asking when she can visit." "She can," I said. "Any time." He smiled real this time and left with more quiet than he came in. When the door closed, I didn't cry. I just stood there, hands wrapped around a warm cup, letting the silence fill the room like light through linen curtains. Later that evening, I opened the drawer and took out the envelope labeled with her name, Ellie. I'd written a letter weeks ago, folded it neatly with the trust documents. Not for now, for later. A way of telling her when someone sees you, you don't disappear. You begin. It's easy to think that when you leave a place, it stops being part of you. But it doesn't. It travels with you. Not in the furniture or the boxes or the photo albums, but in the weight of how you open a door. In the way your hands reach for a switch that isn't there anymore. In the silence between footsteps when memory fills the floor with ghosts who never meant harm but stayed too long. I felt it yesterday when I folded laundry in the new cottage. The instinct to sort towels into 3 piles instead of 1. 1 for me, 1 for Jake and Rebecca, 1 for the kids when they stayed over. There's no reason to do that now, and still my hands moved automatically. Old patterns take time to unlearn. That evening, I sat on the small porch with a blanket around my legs, watching the wind toy with the dying hydrangeas by the fence. A neighbor waved on her way home. I didn't know her name, but the gesture was enough. Inside the radio played soft jazz. I let it hum in the background while I read, not to distract, but to accompany. Loneliness and solitude aren't the same thing. I've come to realize I'm alone now, yes, but I'm not lost. Jake calls every few days. Short calls, but quieter, less defensive. He asks if I'm eating well, if I need anything. He always says my name now, not just Mom, but Mom, are you sure? And Mom, I was thinking as if he finally understands I exist outside his schedule. We don't talk about the house. We don't talk about the sale. That chapter is closed and he's wise enough not to try and pry it open again. Rebecca hasn't called. I don't expect she will. That's all right. Not every ending needs applause. Ellie did come last weekend. She brought me a drawing she'd made. Our old house with the big tree in front and me standing on the porch with a pie in one hand and a cat at my feet. We never had a cat, but I didn't correct her. "I miss your pancakes," she said. "You'll get them tomorrow, I promised." We cooked together the next morning, her in one of my apron sleeves rolled up like she was about to perform surgery. She cracked the eggs too hard, spilled the milk, and grinned with a gap-toothed smile that made something bloom in my chest. After breakfast, we sat on the floor with a photo album. "Is this Daddy?" she asked, pointing at a picture of Jake in high school. "It is. He used to wear that same flannel every day." She looked amazed. He had hair. We laughed. Then suddenly, she turned serious. "Why don't you live with us anymore?" The question came like a pebble in the quiet, small but rippling. I thought for a moment, then answered as truthfully as I could. Because sometimes when people stop seeing you clearly, you have to walk away so they remember what they're missing. She frowned, thinking, "Did it work?" I smiled. "Ask your dad." That night, after she'd gone back home, I sat with the album still open in my lap. The past no longer felt heavy, just full like an attic you'd finally organized. Everything still there, but no longer on top of you. I looked at a picture of Tom standing in the yard with a hammer in his hand, the frame of the house behind him, half-built, full of dreams. We had nothing back then, No blueprint, no safety net, just love and a mutual agreement to figure it out as we went. That was enough. It still is. There's a rhythm to endings if you're quiet enough to hear it. It doesn't come with fanfare. It isn't always clean, but it has a weight. A final click in the lock. A drawer that finally closes. A voice inside you saying, "You did it." That was the last page. I heard it this morning as I made tea, the kettle's whistle rising just as the light hit the kitchen tiles. My chair pulled out an inch too far, then tucked back in. The cupboard door always a little sticky closing on the first try. A good ending doesn't always look like a triumph. Sometimes it looks like peace. The cottage has settled around me not like the old house which pressed in with memory and expectation. This place exhales. It lets me move without apology. There are no chores waiting to be noticed, no conversations to tiptoe around, just days that belong only to me. And the strange thing is, I didn't even know how much I needed that. Today, I went to the post office. The woman behind the counter knew my name. "You've got something from the library," she said, sliding a padded envelope toward me. "New audiobook." I think it startled me, that kindness. Not because it was rare, but because I was finally still enough to feel it. When I came home, I found a letter in the mailbox. Not a bill, not junk. A letter, thick envelope, familiar handwriting. Jake. I sat on the porch with my tea and opened it carefully as if the paper might bruise. Inside 2 pages. No drama, no graveling, just words. I'd waited a long time to hear. "Mom, I've been talking to Ellie. She told me what you said, that when people stop seeing you, you have to walk away. I've been thinking about that a lot. And I want to tell you I'm starting to see you again. Not just as my mother, but as a person. I don't know how to make up for the years I didn't, but I'm trying. Ellie says you made pancakes better than anyone else. Maybe sometime you'll let me come too. Love, Jake." I held the letter in my lap for a long time. Not because I didn't know how to respond, but because I didn't need to respond right away. Some things deserve to sit still, to breathe, to be felt fully before they're answered. Later that afternoon, I pulled out the second envelope, the one with Ellie's name on it. I had written it weeks ago, folded carefully around the trust documents, sealed with the quiet intention of legacy, not wealth, not property, just truth. I took a pen and added a final note at the bottom. P.S. If they ever make you feel small, remember this. You come from a woman who sold her house while they were at work. Not out of spite, out of clarity. You don't owe anyone your silence. Not when your voice has something to say. I placed it back in the drawer. Not for now, but for when she's old enough to understand that courage doesn't always raise its voice. Sometimes it just packs a bag, closes a door, and begins again. As the sun dipped low behind the fence, I stood by the window and watched the wind move through the grass. No music, no tears, just a quiet kind of victory. The kind that no one can take back.